So for this discussion, I want to try to connect up some of our thoughts about the unemployment rate with some of the big data concepts we have been thinking about. So this is an article. This is from Seeking Alpha. So this is a website that they solicit contributions from people all over in the finance industry and the academy, and you can build a reputation by writing good articles, but this is just some analysis that this person did, and we're going to take a look and think about what they're trying to do here. So again, the pictures tell a lot what's going on. So if we think about the unemployment rate, is it gets reported relatively frequently, right? We have data on unemployment, but it takes a little while to compile the data, so it ends up being a little bit slow to get released. And the other thing too is that the unemployment rate changes a lot seasonally, right? We're a lot busier at Christmas time and in some industries in the summertime. And it also changes frequently, month to month to month, right? That as things happen, the rate will bounce around, but there's kind of overall trends that might emerge, even though the individual data points maybe move somewhat randomly, right? So if you look at for example, the black line on this graph here, right? So this is, you can see that's the 19-week rate of change in the unemployment rate. So we're looking at, over the past 19 weeks, did the unemployment rate rise or fall, and if so, by how much? And you can imagine, right, that if the unemployment rate is rising quickly, that would be probably an indication that a recession is coming. And if the unemployment rate is falling, that's probably not an indication of a recession. But if you look at that data, right, it moves around a lot, right? If I just look between January of 2000 and January of 2001, we have the unemployment rate change spiking from negative to almost positive to negative to almost positive to slightly negative to very positive, then back down to negative, and then back to really positive, right? So it's moving a lot. And it would be inappropriate to change our beliefs or expectations about a recession or economic problems based on these wild changes, right? So then the natural question to ask is, well, if the unemployment rate is changing really quickly and somewhat randomly, is there a way to look through or sort of peer through or pierce the noise and get to the true state of things? And there's a couple methods that get used to help do this, and you can see we have a couple different examples here. So the first is this blue line, right? So the blue line, it's the growth in the unemployment rate, but it's been smoothed on a short horizon using what's called an exponential moving average. And the exponential moving average is a really simple model. You can write it down in about 20 characters in Excel. It basically takes the new data and compares it to the old predictions. So let's say we predicted that unemployment rate growth would be 1%, and it was actually 2%. And so what an example of an exponential smoothing model will take a weighted average of those two. So let's say we were doing a 50% alpha level. That's the language you use. That's just the weighting between the forecast and the data. So let's say we did 50%. Well, that would mean that since we predicted 1% and actually observed 2%, that our prediction for next period will be 1.5, the average of 2 and 1. And let's say that next period shows up and it's actually 2.5. Well, we would take the average of 1.5 and 2.5 and predict 2. So right, I mean, if this just keeps going, right, if the next one's 3 and we predict 2, then it would be 2.5. But that would be silly, right? We'd always be exactly a half percentage point behind. But the point is, we don't know that the unemployment rate is going to steadily climb like that, right? So maybe, right, it was 2.5. We predicted 1.5, so our new prediction is 2. And now the unemployment growth rate comes back at 1. Well, that means our new prediction would be 1.5. And that also means that since we didn't go all the way to 2.5, we weren't as far off from 1.5 as we could have been. That the fact that we're waiting between the new data that's revealed, and the old information we already had, means we get a smoother prediction, that we're not basically panicking with every bit of new data. We adjust it a little. The higher the alpha level, the more we adjust. But that, then that as we look at the new data less, we get a smoother data series. And so actually within this chart, you can see two different versions. So the blue is a short horizon exponential moving average, and the red is a long horizon. And so the longer one's smoother. You can see it right in the chart that it's got a smoother curve to it. You can see the trends fairly clearly, right? On this graph, it goes down and then up and then down gradually and then up and then down. Whereas blue, there's still some wiggle in it, but it mostly follows those big trends. And so, and also if you just peek at this, right? If we look at this, you'll notice that exponential moving average, both the short term and the long term, basically turn from being downward sloping to upward sloping right around January of 2001, right at the start of recession. And then something very similar happens in 2008, right just about at the start of the recession. There is a turn in those smoothed out unemployment growth rates. Right, if we look at the green or the black, right, the black, you can see it spiking up, but if you look now into 11 and 12 and 13, you see spiking up in 11, 12, and 13 as well, right? So if we were trying to use that black line to signal when the economy was in trouble, we'd be panicking too often, right? There'd be too frequently we'd be having concerns, right? Using the smooth data, you get a clearer signal for when you actually expect a recession to happen. And this is true for a lot of big data kind of questions. If I have a company that is trying to, for example, adjust how much I order, right? I don't want to, or produce, right? So I don't want to produce a bunch of product in anticipation of huge demand that never actually materializes. So as a kid, I remember there was a huge shortage of these plush baby dolls. They said Cabbage Patch Kids, I think, right? And I remember it saying it's Xavier Roberts, and there was like a signature on like the backside of the babies. A little odd, but they were in huge demand, and then production ramped up, and by that time the fad was gone, and so there was just a huge oversupply the following Christmas, right? So that would be calibrating to a data series that wasn't smooth enough, right? So you get panic production or panic shutting down of production that's unwarranted because the data is actually just moving randomly, right? And so there's a bit of an art and a science to deciding how much to smooth series. So if you take an operations management class, that will probably be a part of the curriculum, is explaining how to smooth these data series out. So this is just back to 2000. Let's take a look at the author does some longer charts. So here is, back in the 40s and 60s. You can see kind of a similar pattern. The red and the blue lines start creeping up right about when recessions are going to happen. So we go down, and again, these are the smoothed growth in the unemployment rate. They're spiking right at the start. The green too, you can kind of see the green. That's the growth, the 19-week growth in unemployment. That has a lot. That has some more wiggle to it, but does also sort of follow the pattern that when you see when a big spike is happening, that's right at the start of recessions. But there's false signals as well. So that, right, the blue and the red do a much better job. So, I mean, if we look at the red in particular, right, the only time we see the red, right, so here it's up, we see it going up here, we see it going up here, it flattens but doesn't really go up, it goes up here, flattens down here. So if it's smooth enough that it's actually a reliable indicator of a coming recession. And this is that. So this is the whole data series. You could see up, 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 up. And so it really functions fairly well. I mean, there's probably a bit of a data snooping bias in that the author could have picked the smoothing horizon to be exactly correct given this data set, which means it may not be super great going forward. That's always a risk. But that means, right, how is that relevant to us today? So if I go back and look at that original chart, right, this is our data going into, right, the end of, right where we are in August of, this article was written just like a couple days ago. So you see right in the end of August, and our growth rate in the unemployment is flat, right? The unemployment rate is flat, and those signals are trending down, right? We don't see a turn up in the blue or the red signal in those smooth unemployment rate signals. So even though, we have, close to historically low unemployment, fairly close to what the natural unemployment rate would be in the United States, we're not, based on this model, we're not seeing a signal of a coming recession. But over time, right, this could change. So this is the kind of information that markets pay attention to, right, and why the unemployment rate is watched so closely by the stock market, because changes in the unemployment rate can signal coming economic problems, and the stock market will respond in advance to the economic problems actually materializing, right? So if it becomes inevitable that economic problems are coming, the stock market will react as if those economic problems have already occurred. And so the unemployment rate, as it comes out, has a big effect on markets for that reason, right? That it's a strong, if slow, indicator of what the economy is going to do in the near future. And so that's also a good example of a career in big data, right? So being a stock market analyst, if you're doing fundamental analysis, you will look at company fundamentals, but also look at global macroeconomic conditions, including economic indicators like the unemployment rate. So that's our August 3rd, 2018 forecast for the economy, is that we're not getting recession signals per this metric yet. But new numbers come out all the time, and that could change. But for the moment, the trend looks solid. So that's big data and unemployment.